Good afternoon. Welcome to Political No Brainer, the podcast where we move past winner takes all politics and into real conversations. I'm Jeff Rabinowitz, and this season we're bringing in voices from all sides to challenge assumptions, bridge divides, and build a better understanding of today's biggest issues. And today I'm joined with Laura Lucra, the president of the Independence Center, and she's a great guest. I'm glad to have her back. We just chatted a little bit about what we're going to talk about, and I was excited to hear she was actually interested in my suggestion of what we're going to talk about. So, I'd love you to kick it off because when we were just talking, you offered so much already on the topic. So, and
Yeah,
he's adorable.
thanks.
Your
Oh
cat's
yes, this
adorable.
is this is Dart. He doesn't like me actually. He loves Zoom calls. So he's gonna sit here until he gets bored with sitting on my lap because he likes video chats. I really don't know. I didn't know this was a thing about cats.
I
But yeah, thank you for having me back. I was really interested in your idea of what if we made it easier for young people to borrow money from the Small Business Administration in order to start businesses? And what occurred to me when I read that was, well, we don't think twice about letting 18-year-olds decide to take out massive amounts of debt in order to go to college. But I think if you said to people, let's let them start a business, there's a lot more hesitation around that. And I think that that's not correct. You know, we we're letting 18-year-olds decide to take out loans that they can never get out from under because they are not discharged if you declare bankruptcy.
Right. So they're not discharged. They're stuck under this weight of, often kids' wages are garnished for these loans. They often, I won't say the name of the school because that could cause me a liability issue. But in Orlando, there's this giant internet school that teaches you how to build a website or how to be a great video guy for Hollywood, and they are extremely expensive. And the kids run up a lot of debt getting this education. Now, websites, for example, have become something you could literally go on the website, the internet yourself, and find a lot of already built websites that work pretty well in the beginning and just pay $300. So maybe they can work for those companies for $20, $25 an hour. But like you said, they get into this situation where they really believe that this education would pay off big, and it just doesn't. So
Mhm.
that was really my point there. And then, but there are kids. So I'll quote Anthony Bourdain. He said, some kids in the kitchen are like their last beacon of hope is in the kitchen. So they're in the kitchen. They're a team. They're working hard. They're doing really well. They're getting paid peanuts. And but that is their future, so they're passionate, right?
Mhm.
So who's to say that they get this loan, they learn a lot in the kitchen and working for an employer, they get this loan and they start themselves a small place, even a food truck, even or a
Mhm.
small place, and they're just incredible at this restaurant they have that they built, and they're able to do it, they're able to borrow that money. Wouldn't that be a great way to close the gap between rich and poor, between kids just getting sunk in a college debt and feeling like they kind of got screwed, when
Mhm.
in fact we could turn the whole equation around by some new thinking.
Yeah, I think we absolutely need new thinking. And, one of the issues that's coming up is the lack of people available in skilled trades. And we need people who are plumbers and electricians and home builders. And yet we've created this conversation around education, like the only success is if you get a 4-year degree. And we don't ask how much should that cost or how will it translate into higher earnings? We don't ask what types of skills you need to teach students so they make higher earnings. Like that type of research is really like very little of it is done and published. And instead, we have this one size fits all view of what kids' futures should be like. And it doesn't ask them like what do we do with kids who like to build things with their hands and who want to, whether building is like food or a business or a physical a building, right? Like we just act like that's a failure if you are not going to go to college, if you're going to have an apprenticeship or get a 2-year degree. and it's not serving us well for a lot of different reasons.
Yeah, it's really not. Like you said, these kids are also, what? Why assume? Why assume for a minute that every kid wants to be a doctor or a lawyer?
Hmm.
Why assume for a minute that every, you know, I mean, and then the college degree does it. Like you said, they do this 4 years, and then it turns out to be something they don't want to do. They get a job with an employer, and they realize, oh my God, I wish I don't know where I went with this. Then, so a kid that learns. So let's just say this kid starts out from high school, gets this vocational training to be a plumber. And
Hmm.
within that education, he also gets an education on how to be a businessman, on how to run a small business. And then he steps out into the world and he's eligible for a 60 or an $80,000 loan to get a van and tools and to advertise and to struggle to actually pay his rent during that struggle. And then you might say, well, there's going to be an enormous amount of defaults. Well, there's an enormous amount of defaults on student loans. And there was even during after COVID, I worked for a restaurant chain, and they got a PPE loan, a payment protection loan, and then it was
Hmm.
forgiven, $150,000 to protect payroll that wasn't worth protecting. I mean, the kids were getting 20 hours a week. I mean, believe me, they would have survived without that job, but the employer was forgiven a $150,000 loan. So
Jeez.
we're really putting the cart before the horse in so many ways. And that's what I love about the independent political candidates and the thinking outside the box. Here in Orlando, we've got this lawyer. He's a personal injury attorney, the world's biggest personal. His name is John Morgan. And he just said he's put up the money to fund a new party, the Capitalist Party. And I'm like, I'm just wondering if he would be interested in hearing some of my ideas about what a capitalist party should look like and how we should put it together.
Oh, that's interesting. I hadn't heard about that person. Um, yeah, I think too, you were talking about the organization or the university college in Orlando. And I thought if your listeners aren't familiar, it might be worth talking a little bit about some of these institutions are for-profit institutions. Right. And so they're not selective. They admit a bunch of students, and those students take out loans to attend college, and they may never graduate, but they still owe the money. And they can't, the student loan debt can't be forgiven. I mean, there's some limited circumstances where it can get forgiven, but it can't be discharged through bankruptcy. I'm not sure what conditions you have to make to get out from under that debt. And I think we aren't really training kids to make decisions about what they want their future to look like and how they should fund it. And to me, that seems like before we turn an 18-year-old loose with a potentially $250,000 bill for college, like shouldn't we be helping these kids understand the ramifications of their decisions and looking at all the potential options?
Yeah, and how do we go about doing that has always been my question too. Because really, kids do jump out into the world with big expectations,
Hmm.
and really kind of get lose heart of it all when they realize that they're not gaining ground on the things they thought they really thought they would be gaining ground shortly after out of high school or shortly after out of
Hmm.
college, and
Well, we,
it
we make
becomes.
it sound like it's just a silver bullet. Like if you go to college, then you will have a certain level of salary. And that's not true. It's not college that's making it so that students are earning salaries afterwards. Some of it is training, some of it is opportunities, but it's not the college degree necessarily.
No, and the college degree isn't even opening doors for a lot of kids. Nowadays, so
Hmm.
many kids are getting college degrees that they're finding themselves applying, and there's 200 other applicants with the same credentials, basically that college degree,
Hmm.
and they're not getting the callbacks for the jobs even to see if they and it's becoming a real problem. Like you said, you've got the debt, and then you don't even have a chance to get employment. And then, like I said, you wind up in the restaurant business or something where you're like, okay, I'm making good money, but why did I go to college to do this?
Right,
And then
exactly.
and then and that's really something I'm always. And then the other thing I'm always interested in is training kids, especially not necessarily in finance, but in investing. Like if
Hmm.
you know, there's this guy again, and you may not have heard of him because I do have some, but random. things I
Mhm.
read, but there's this guy Ted Wessler. He's one of Warren Buffett's purchasing lieutenants, and he took a $70,000 IRA and turned it into a $260 million fortune by just
Wow.
moving it around. And he says it was all basically information available to anybody else, just like him. Now, granted, not everybody's going to take 70 grand and turn it into $260 million, but he was saying take advantage of your company's 401ks, take advantage of their matching funds, and then also have an understanding of what to do with those funds as they accrue. So, could we teach kids some of that stuff in college? Like, can we teach them the difference between an index fund and a money market,
Hmm.
or a good investment?
Or teach them ways, yeah, absolutely. Teach them to think about investing and compound interest and all of these things, right? Because it's, I suspect, although I don't know for sure, but I suspect that there's differences in thinking about money that cut across socioeconomic status. And so if you're growing up in a family where you're just making ends meet, which is a larger and larger percentage of American families every year define themselves as just making ends meet. I forget what the average salary is now at which people say they're just making ends meet, but it's incredibly high. It's like a household income of $120,000 a year, and people still say we're just making ends meet. So, if you are just making ends meet, you're probably not growing up talking with your parents and learning about investment strategies and compound interest and like how much it's going to take for you to save in retirement and how much easier it would be to save for retirement if you start when you're 21 instead of when you're 45. And we need to be talking with kids about all of these things, including, I thought it was really interesting your example about Jeff Bezos started his business with a $250,000 loan from his parents. I think one of the other differentiators is that if you come from a family with more resources, then yeah, somebody can help you out with seed money for your dream business that's just not possible for the vast majority of kids.
Right, and that's exactly so. The seed money, that's exactly what we're talking about right now. We both
Mhm.
agree on is the seed money should be available, and also the vital information that parents that know more impart on children, whereas kids that come from homes where, and I'm not knocking single moms or anything, where they come from homes like you said, where they're barely making it, where they're
Mhm.
not thinking about taking money out of it, where they're not even offered some sort of matching funds in an IRA or something. How do we get that information? So how do we get the children to understand? I'm sure Jeff Bezos' parents had some understanding of business. There
Oh,
was an
sure.
example, and then there was the example I used of Robert Reich saying it's just an outrage that when Bill Gates started, his mom used her connections at IBM to get him the contract. Well,
Mhm.
if you read his book, his mom also told him don't just take anything from IBM. Don't sell the licenses in under 5,000 license intervals. Whereas if you're just some kid that has no understanding of business and no parents to impart an understanding of business, and IBM says, "Hey, we want 10 licenses, 5,000 bucks a piece," and this kid's like $50,000.
Mhm.
Holy moly! Whereas his mom said, "Don't even consider anything under
Yeah.
5,000 licenses because they've got the money. They're willing to make the deal," and she imparts this confidence, and I'm like, 10 licenses isn't enough. That's
Mhm.
how he got to be one of the world's richest men, and it was one of the world's richest man for almost 35 years in a row. In the beginning, I think he's lost that spot, but
Mhm.
but and Jeff Bezos is another one. His parents, the 250,000, like Robert Reich was saying, it's just an outrage that we see these oligarchs making it, but they have all this going for them. Everybody should have some of these things going for
Yeah, I think the moral of that story is listen to your mom, but I might be
them.
biased. Um, yeah, what strikes me in how you're describing that is I think in a lot of cases, what kids are taking from college is it's like, we're going to teach you how to be an employee. We're going to train you up so that you go work for someone else. And you're talking about a viewpoint that is more like, how can I use money to do the things that I want to do with my life? And that's a really different viewpoint, right? Like it's a really different perspective. There's a lot more agency in saying, okay, I want to be a plumber. I want to have my own plumbing business. What do I need to do in order to get there? Versus like, I would like to go to college, get the credential, and then go get a job working for somebody else building their dream.
Right. And that you know, that's what we're doing a lot of. We really are doing.
Hmm.
They're the one. I always say I've always noticed my years and really my whole wheelhouse is restaurants. And in all my years, I've always noticed that anybody that owns a restaurant and succeeds owns eight, nine locations or more. And those who just try to open one location don't seem to make it because they started out as a disadvantage. There was no knowledge of what they're getting themselves into. So how do we
Hmm.
impart that knowledge in the beginning? Commercial leases and insurance, the understanding of you're no longer competing with the restaurant next door. You're competing with the world. I mean, you can literally Uber from across the country now and get it on. You can get Cat's Delicatessen delivered to your front door on
Hmm.
dry ice. So you're up against a lot. And how do you build all? And how do you beat that? And there are ways to beat it. There's certainly not. And if the thing you like to do, you're not able to. How do you invest in the company you like that does what they do? Like that was Robert Kiyosaki's book, not only work for money, but make the money work for you. How do you like his book's really vague. He says rich dad, poor dad, but
Hmm.
again, he had a rich dad that imparted on him certain knowledges, and a poor dad, his dad, who imparted on him work ethic and
Hmm.
other things. So all that's important information that he seemed to get both the stories, both benefits from the two different dads, his best friend's dad and his dad. And it is none of it's such a big secret that you have to
Hmm.
have your best friend's dad has the knowledge. These secrets are out there. And
Hmm.
we just need to get them out there to the masses is what I think through the public education system.
Yeah, I agree. I think public education in a lot of cases can create this idea of kind of like we impart information to you. And I think there's so much more possibility for kids at all levels of school when what we're trying to say to them is like, tell us what's important to you and let us help you build the life that and the values and the things that you want to create for yourselves, right? Instead of be a passive recipient of information, be a passive employee who's going to go work building somebody else's business.
Yeah, and the more we do that, because there's this amazing, and every year it grows bigger and bigger. The gap between the rich and poor, every year
Mhm.
it grows bigger and bigger. And I really think some of this thinking could really slow that trend or even reverse that trend. You don't really have to work really hard for somebody and hope
Mhm.
that they feel really good about you and then wait for some minuscule pay raise and then I just feel like people should be able to really invest in themselves in a way with a lot of knowledge that they succeed with those investments.
And I also think that people are incredibly creative. And what's been really interesting to me over the past few years, watching the growth of TikTok, for example, is seeing how people have created careers out of making content about something that they just happen to love. And so there's this incredible creativity and ingenuity and flexibility that people bring. And it's not all, like you open a business, a traditional business like a restaurant or a plumbing business or a construction company, right? It's like seeing where there are opportunities and then fulfilling those things. So I've been just fascinated to see the rise of these content creators who it's really like they're monetizing the things that they care most about. Maybe it's makeup, maybe it's all kinds of random things that I see. Like I see people who paint and have make their living sharing painting content on social media, right? Like it's just this incredible richness of people being able to work in the space where they really love what it is and make money doing it. And I think that's what everybody wants.
Yeah, absolutely. And we should be, and then if there's a secret to it, we should be getting no secret out that, yeah, if you're going to spend a lot of time on social media and you're doing something you love doing, you can do really well at it.
Hmm.
And that's really a great thing because then you wouldn't have so many lost kids just working for they would be doing the things they love.
Yeah,
Or
and then it's like you go to a job doing somebody else's work and think like this isn't fun. I don't feel inspired. What's wrong with me? And I think like the answer is nobody would enjoy this.
That's true. And it's like, and then they rotate through employees and they just, and, but they'll keep getting new employees and employees will
Hmm.
cycle through. But the truth is there's no fulfillment. But
Hmm.
yet somebody's getting rich and somebody's not even getting ahead.
Hmm. And we really need to figure out how we train kids to look at the world around them to spot these opportunities, which I do think they're doing. One of the interesting things about younger people, Gen Z especially, is that they're so motivated by the idea of side hustles and like they're out there working on projects and thinking of other ways that they can make money and get ahead. And they're really different and unique in that regard. It's kind of intriguing to see. So I think they're getting a little bit of it, but I think there's so much more we could do to teach kids to think about how they want to create their futures and think about the kind of supports we want to make available to people. Just as a country, right? As local school districts in the state and the county and whatever. What are the things that we can make available to kids so that they can create a, a prosperous, flourishing life for themselves instead of just telling them, well, the answer is when you're 18, you go to college.
Right. And not only that, and imagine this now, because there is this always this, the pushback I get when I'm out there talking to people about recreating our K through 12 education system. Let's just say we don't recreate our K through 12 education system because nothing's changed in 50 years, and my guess is nothing will in 50 years. But what if we made all that you just said, those types of knowledge and that type of information session, if we made them after school activities, or if we
Mhm.
made them or if we made them summer school activities, or if we even made them incentive based activities, like if kids actually complete this course, maybe they would get a gift card from Nike or Amazon or something if they fulfill the last project, or and then they understand how to make what they really love to do, how they really want to do what they want to do, how to make it profitable. And
Mhm.
even if we made the courses like investing, taking some of that extra. You have a side gig. You got a side gig, whatever it is. You're making extra. Don't just spend it on a new iPhone. Think about investing it in something. When I was
Mhm.
a kid, I had a side gig. I had a cleaning business. So I had this commercial cleaning business. So I'm there. It
Oh,
was
wow.
called yeah, and the one place I used to rent from, pressure cleaners and floor scrubbers, was General Rental. One day the guy that owned General Rental said, "Hey, can you do my floors?" I said, "Yeah." So I do the floors. Then he gives me like 300 cash. It's a crazy story. He says, you should invest that in Home Depot stock. So I had no idea who even called to buy Home Depot stock. So
Yeah.
yeah, yeah, great, great. Then I went out drinking all night and I spent the $300. But I imagine if I knew how to do that. I mean, and I actually did it more than just once. Because I was always making extra money. I was always busy. When I was a kid, I was always shoveling snow and selling fireworks and everything else, doing paper routes and
You
stuff.
were
But I
an
was always,
entrepreneur.
but I never
That's
did
fascinating.
anything with it.
Hmm.
But I always did.
That's so interesting. Okay, how did you like develop this mindset of like let me hustle and do these things? Like where did that idea come from, do you think?
Well, I think it started with snow shoveling.
Uh-huh.
I just wanted to make extra money, and then I just always found something to do. Even now, that's why I'm wearing this shirt because I actually have a full time job at a theme park, but this is my business.
Hmm.
We pick up medical waste. So today I was just setting up the creepy Empire tattoo show. Like 75 booths needed, boxes and sharps boxes. This guy called me, hey, can you do it? And I was like, yeah, sure, I'll set it all up. It was good. It was a good contract. So that's
Hmm.
what I was doing today. So I don't know. I've always been interested in those in small business, and but I've
And like
also noticed
opportunities. You
opportunities.
spot
Yeah.
opportunities.
Yeah, and I've been doing this for nearly 10 years, right? But I've also noticed that there's big companies, 3 or 4, that consume every contract, no matter no matter, even if they call me for an estimate, they find out that
Hmm.
they're not only bound by a contract for 3 years, they didn't realize that 30 days ago it auto renewed for another 3 years.
Jeez.
So it's fine, I do just fine. It's extra. This was a big show. He's like, we got 4 more this year. I'm like, oh wow, cool, I'll do that. And then but but I've noticed big business has consumed a lot of what the little guy does. I
Hmm.
even realized I can't even book a haircut without going through a national call center. I think it's called Booksy or something. So even my local bartender has a national call center doing his bookings. And he's like, and if you cancel, I think they charge my card. Like I signed up something already with a credit card on some. I don't even know what I did, but the only way I could make an appointment was he said, "We're strictly
Right.
books."
Yeah. I think you're right though that there has been in a lot of industries, it's like there's so much complexity and regulation and just different levels of expertise that you have to go through in order to succeed in that space. You end up with little guys have a hard time getting started and a hard time establishing themselves because what you need is a big firm in order to be an expert in all these areas of complexity that like smaller guys can't compete in. And what we end up with is just a few options in a lot of industries, right? It's like, and it suppresses innovation. So it's very hard to innovate in, say, healthcare delivery because it's so difficult to create healthcare businesses. And states have made it very difficult to open new all kinds of healthcare related businesses. And the problem is it makes consumers worse off because now, you have to wait 6 months to get an MRI or right, like to
Right.
get in with a doctor because you can't meet demand because there's only a few organizations that can afford or have the technical expertise to provide these services. And it's an issue both for people who want to create businesses, but also for people who would like to buy and consume the services.
Yeah, it's gotten really crazy. So I always tell the story about Amazon. So Amazon, so Jeff Bezos, Warren Buffett, Berkshire Hathaway, and JP Morgan about 6 years ago formed a company. It was called Haven. And all they were going to do is create an insurance company that insures their combined three companies, 1 million employees. Well, the whole thing flopped. It turned out to be
Hmm.
it wouldn't work out. But out of nowhere, and prior to that, Amazon bought PillPack. But out of nowhere, Amazon's become the biggest pharmaceutical local pharmacy. They're the biggest pharmaceutical company now, delivering pharmacies all over the country. Recently, I needed new eye drops, and they said, my insurance said we use Amazon Pharmacy now. Go online to Amazon Pharmacy.
Oh, wow.
Crazy as it may be, they said the best way to get your pharmaceuticals is to be a Prime member. I'm like, oh, how ironic that is. So
Surprising.
and then I'm like reading all more into it. And so years ago, Amazon was testing drone delivery. And
Hmm.
all the drones will deliver is a small package, up to a certain size, up to 5 pounds. I mean, to me, that's pharmaceuticals. And
Hmm.
to me, sooner or later, drones are going to be delivering your pharmaceuticals to the point where your local, family owned and operated pharmacy is going to be gone.
Hmm.
And it's like, I mean,
Yeah.
big business is just consuming small business in every
Hmm.
way, shape, and form. And
Yep.
yeah, I'm reading kind of too much into it, the whole conspiracy theory
Hmm.
about how they initially they were just trying to insure their own employees. The whole thing flopped, but somehow out of nowhere, Amazon bought PillPack. Then PillPack became
Hmm.
this national pharmaceutical home delivery service. And the best way to get your pharmaceuticals is to be a Prime member, which was right there in the first email, the email of introduction. And I'm like, so how do we, you know, some people would like to go to pharmacy school and
Yeah.
open their own little place.
Yeah,
And
and I think it's important too. What you're saying is not like let's get rid of Amazon. What you're saying is let's give consumers choices because yeah, some people would rather go to their local small pharmacist. Like some people have questions and would like to talk to a human being in person, and that's really important. And I think you lose that when everything is a big impersonal chain, or like there's not even a person to talk to. It's all going to happen through a computer.
internet and chat and everything else.
Hmm.
And it's like,
Yeah.
yeah, and we're really losing that. And how do we turn that? I believe the way we sort of turn that back around is like we said, through education, through
Hmm.
imparting on kids the knowledge to do what they do best, to do what they enjoy doing. It doesn't have to be cooking, it doesn't have to be
Hmm.
mowing grass. It could be extremely creative.
Right.
and it could be something that they're really passionate about, and then they
Yeah.
understand how to promote it through social media because kids are really digging social media these days.
What your thing about what they're passionate about just reminded me that I was seeing this content creator on TikTok, and she's on the other platforms now too. But what she loves is wedding dresses. And her content is her trying on these wedding dresses. She orders them from all over the internet. She's in this like pink dressing room, her hair and is made up, and like she always looks like kind of like a Barbie doll. And she's trying on all these like floofy, ornate, crazy wedding dresses. And that is her business. She loves wedding dresses. She resells them, but also like her content is the videos. And I just think like it's really amazing that in 2025 you could make out a career out of loving to try on wedding dresses. And I feel like that's the sort of creativity and inspiration that we need to teach kids how to harness instead of just saying to them, well, the answer is to go get a 4-year degree. Because, like, what would you tell this woman, right? Like, go to fashion school? I think
Right.
that's probably what her college, her high school counselors told her, right? But that's not actually what she is about or doing.
No, and she's
Something a little
creating an
different.
emotional bond with potential customers by trying on those wedding dresses
Yeah,
and and
absolutely.
and playing those videos, and then they're like, "That's the person I want to buy a wedding dress from," and they'll go back
Hmm.
on her video and see what else she has to offer, or go on her website and see what she's offering, and that's really really something special that's changing the way we think as we're
Hmm.
as purchasers,
I
as
think
customers.
the thing that comes through is that she really loves, she has a passion for this. She really loves it. And I think the answer is not like teach kids how to love wedding dresses or how to make video content. It's right. It's like, how do you think about creating a career out of the things that are most important to you? And I don't know who's good at that. Like that seems like something that we need to figure out and do better at teaching kids.
Well, absolutely, and I think there's a lot of opportunity because we could train people how to do that.
Hmm.
It's like you said, like your education is in consumer psychology, a lot of it, and
Hmm.
there's a lot of, lot of really interesting people that want to take a part in kids' lives and be counselors for them, and it also we're at the point where now one person could serve a lot of kids via the internet.
Hmm.
So it's really something we need to consider because the path we're going down right now is we've got a lot of lost kids and a lot of discouraged people and a lot of people, like you said, yeah, they're earning 120 grand a year. They still don't have a house. They're
Yeah,
still
exactly.
looking at the lease they're going to renew, and it's going up $400 a month, and they don't even think they haven't been able to afford last year's rate. And now
Hmm.
they're looking at their new lease and saying it's going up $400 a month. Me and three kids are still living in this one bedroom apartment. And that's there's no simple answers, but preparing people for life and navigating life is really something we need to focus on more.
Hmm. And I think there's been kind of a move in a lot of states for education to be more tailored to kids' abilities and aptitudes. And they think the things they care about, charter schools and micro schools have been really effective for making it so that kids can get an education that suits them and hopefully like help them be on a path that is more tailored to them versus saying it's the same for everybody. But I do have to, I think like, as an 18-year-old where I wanted to go to college and my plan for college was absurd. And I'm lucky I didn't get to do it because I would have graduated from undergraduate with a mountain of debt, a mountain. And like, what did I know? I was 18.
I,
Um, so I really question like why we're so eager to let kids decide to take out these massive loans. I understand the goal is to get more college attendance and make college more available to more kids, but I think like what we didn't do really was make it more affordable because you're graduating and owing tons of money in a lot of cases. I'd love to know, I should have looked this up. I'd love to know what the average debt is of college graduates in 2025.
Well, I actually heard recently because of the whole Trump was going to close down the Department of Education and move the
Hmm.
debt load to to the Treasury Department. And there's
Okay.
1.5 trillion dollars in student loans out there, outstanding student loans. 1.5 trillion dollars. So the question was, can Treasury even handle this enormous mountain of debt collection when in
Hmm.
fact they can't even handle what they're doing now because the department that was another debate. But the point was is kids are 1.5 trillion dollars in debt for education. I would
Hmm.
love to know not only what each child is, on average is, but what their return on what they're getting in
Hmm.
return for that debt, because to me it doesn't seem like a lot, and it doesn't seem like a significant number of kids are getting anything in return for it. I do see, being like I said, my whole wheelhouse being the restaurant business, I see really smart kids. I know one kid that went to school for media,
Hmm.
for being a reporter, and then decided she didn't like it. We're together in the theme park, and she just didn't like this 5 year. I'm thinking, wow, I wish I had that education. Like
Hmm.
I would like to be somebody on the ground in Iraq, trying to figure out what's going on there. I thought that would be cool, but she doesn't like it. But I didn't. I and so I think we should really after you graduate high school, just spending time 6 months with kids, exploring different careers, different companies, letting them rotate through the system a little
Hmm.
bit, try to understand at least what they want. Like you said, you had one particular course of action, and you're glad you didn't take
Right.
it.
Right.
And life is 1,000 lefts and 1,000 right turns. And if you make one left turn different than you would than the left turn you made, you're going to wind up at a different place later in life. So you had that opportunity to get
Hmm.
it back on the good path. But some kids,
Yeah, they don't. That's true. And we really, I think there are some 18-year-olds who know what they're going to do and they leave college. They have a plan in front of them, right? They have scholarships. They are ready for the next step in their lives. But I think a lot of kids don't know that. And we sort of look at it like high school has failed if they don't go straight on to college rather than thinking about what is a logical next step for you? If you don't want to go spend 4 years sitting in a classroom, which I think a lot of people don't, and I think also a lot of 18-year-old boys don't want to do, we act like there's something wrong with you instead of saying, okay, cool, but what do you want to do? Let us help you figure that out so that you can take a next step that's helpful to you instead of just saying, no, no, you have to go to college.
right? And then they wind up flunking out and still having debt, or they wind
Exactly.
up,
You still
yeah,
owe the money. It's hard to get a job without it. Um, yeah, I think I think also universities could and colleges could do a lot better job of figuring out what are the things that are teaching that end up with students getting well-paying jobs afterwards? Because there are some degrees that don't do very well. And I have seen very few, probably no colleges that can give you data like if you are studying political science at our university, this is what the average graduate gets. And this is the percentage of people who have a job upon graduation. Why don't universities collect that information and share it with prospective students? If somebody's sharing that information, I would love to know about it. I've never seen it.
yeah. Or if they're not, if the universities aren't doing it voluntarily, what about private organizations getting involved and offering that?
Hmm.
Because that analysis is important. Because
It really is. And like, can you imagine? So I think the average cost of a college degree is something like maybe it's around $30,000 a year. So you're asking somebody to make an investment, assuming no scholarships, of $120,000, and you can't show ROI numbers. Like that
right.
wouldn't work in any other industry that I can think of.
Yeah, and it doesn't, and really, kids are getting offers to go to schools, just like you said, without no free ride, just saying we'll accept you, and they're going,
Hmm.
wow, this is great, but why is it great? What is it
Hmm.
going to return? I
Exactly.
mean,
What's
is
the
there any?
return?
There's no analysis there. There's no reason to believe it's great other than you're excited because it's got a certain pedigree, because
Hmm.
you just thought
Or
of it
because
when
there's a football team that you like, or a basketball team, or
right.
it's a party school. I
That's
mean,
true.
if you wanna spend 4 years having parties, I think you can do it for a little bit less
A whole
than
lot
thirty
less than
thousand
30,000 a year.
dollars a year.
I can vouch for that because I didn't go to college, but
I mean,
but
yeah, there you go. That's maybe we should have Coach Trippy's college is
no, we
very inexpensive. It's a 4-year degree and
no, I don't think
in a
that's
good time.
no, I don't think we should have that. But but eh, I wish I knew more, really. I always thought that. Looking back now, especially, I wish I knew more. Like you said, I had this kind of sense of entrepreneurship. What if I would have really stuck with one particular thing and made it bigger or better? Even this,
Hmm.
it's okay, but what if I really focused on it?
Hmm.
Would I be better off today than I am with an employer and this? I'm okay. I'm fine with my shared bounty. I'm just saying if I ever had certain knowledge imparted in me, if I ever had the understanding like discipline, like my kids are swimmers, and I always say, even though they are really good, I'm not being biased.
Hmm.
I am being biased, but they are really good. But I'm like, you know what? Even if you weren't really good, you get disciplined. You're staring at
Hmm.
the bottom of a pool for 3 hours a day. You're disciplined.
Hmm.
I mean, it's a good thing you're getting from it. I mean, I'm always glad when you tell me you broke this school's record or you met this expectation and we're going to some because I like to go travel when they swim because that's always fun too. But if nothing else, and then I always had that logic, and then I ran into a person. She was a state attorney, an eminent domain attorney for the state for the education system, and she told me the only reason I can look at these contracts, she goes by the pound, not by the page. These 300-pound contracts
Jeez.
is because I have the discipline from swimming. I'm like, oh, I was right about
Yeah, yeah, there you go.
something.
Um, yeah, I think the discipline piece of it is really important. But it's not the whole thing, right? Like, I think probably some of what your kids internalize from you too is to spot opportunities. And I think that's this entrepreneurial mindset that we sort of we think is a good thing, but we don't do a good enough job teaching it to people. Like you had it very naturally, but I don't know how you get kids to think that way in the first place.
Just tell them. I always say kids never listen, but they're always listening.
Yeah.
I always want to tell my kids something. I know they're gonna say something stupid like, "Oh yeah, sure, Dad. Shut up, Dad." But I know that in the end they were listening, and sometimes I
Hmm.
see it later on that they're doing it. I'm okay with it. So I don't have a big giant ego. Like I don't want to hear, "Oh, Dad, you're a genius." I don't really need to never hear that. But I watch later and I see the results of me just. But some kids don't have any of that
Hmm.
positive influence in their life. And I've always thought, yeah, you're never gonna change that. I see people that I have podcasts with post dads need to be dads. Moms, and it's like, okay, that's a great philosophy, but some dads will never be a dad. So
Hmm.
how do we get important knowledge to the kids that will never have a dad? And
Hmm.
I've always believed the best way to do that is through our K through 12 education system. And the
Hmm.
pushback has always been, the teachers union's the strongest union in the world, not only the country, and they're gonna do things. And then people say, but there's charter schools, charter schools. My kids go to a charter school, but it's not for everyone. And a lot of
Hmm.
times, charter schools get great results because they only accept great kids. So
Hmm.
there's definitely it's definitely a little bit of a it's a great way to look at it. This school has tremendous results, yeah, but they've also refused 30% of the public school kids that
Hmm.
public school kids had to take. So, how do we get that knowledge? My feeling is there is a way to do it. It may be outside the regular curriculum, the regular reading, writing, and arithmetic, but how do we do it? And it could be outside of school. It could be on their own via the
Hmm.
internet and incentive based. And I'm always thinking, is that something the state could populate, or is that something the private sector could populate? Because I think that the opportunity, the way to do it is there, and the understanding to do it is there. It just hasn't happened yet.
Hmm. I think one of the tremendous benefits of education innovation that we're seeing right now, excuse me, one of the benefits we're seeing of education innovation is instead of saying, if you don't fit into this educational institution, something is wrong with you, we've started making different types of schools so that we can get kids matched with the place that fits them. And that's been, sorry, that's been tremendous.
Hey there.
Oh, apologize.
No
Um,
worries.
I can say some of that again if I need to.
Yeah. Go ahead. Yeah, absolutely. Please.
So I think one of the benefits that we've seen from education innovation happening in the last few years, especially since COVID, is that instead of saying to kids, you need to fit the educational institution or something's wrong with you, we started making more types of educational institutions. And they fit a wider variety of kids. Um, but I think there's often this tendency to look at institutions, whether it's education or healthcare or politics even, right? And say, no, we have a way of doing things. And if you don't fit that way, then you're the problem, not the institution. And I think just kind of culturally, we're having this switch where we're saying, no, institutions serve people. And if they are not flexible enough to serve individuals, then we need to change something about the institution because they're not working in a lot of instances.
Yeah, so to that point, I actually had this incredible interview with Temple Grandin. I don't know if you know who she is,
Mm,
but it's on my
yeah.
podcast, hour and 20 minutes. You got to check it out. So she
I
talked
love
about her
her.
whole. Yeah,
She's
she's
so cool.
amazing. I couldn't believe she spent an hour and 20 minutes with me. I just emailed her, like I email lots of people. She emailed me back. So you want me to do your podcast? I'm like, yeah, I do.
Okay,
So
now
there she
I
is.
feel very cool at this point. If I if I have a
Political no-brainer is
podcast,
the cool.
yeah, if I have a
You're
podcast host in common with Temple Grandin, my cool factor just went up
way up,
seven.
way high. No, I'm just kidding. I'm just no, but she was great, and she talked about her whole path, and that's exactly it. Is institutionally everything failed her, but somehow
Hmm.
she made a go of it. So I was
Hmm.
like, how do we make this on a grand scale? Because, like she said, she's this engineering genius. She's this animal psychology genius. She created the hug machine. Some kids are emotionally detached. She created the hug machine. I think it's really neat. And she was like, I just don't use it anymore. I like hugs now. Well, that's great. So but, um, but if you think about it, how do we do it on a grand scale? Like she was saying, okay, like she was saying from her engineering point of view, when she's on a glass elevator and she sees all the rotating parts, that just fascinates her. And there's more. We need more people that know how to fix that stuff. So how do we say this autistic child who we can't get to seem to sit down and listen to history? We can't have him learn history. We could have him learn what he's really interested in and
Hmm.
learn it in a really big way, like she did. How do we put this on a grand scale? First of all, how do we identify the kind of teaching they need? How do we identify what interests them? There needs to be a huge investment on those points.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think you identified something interesting, which is the Small Business Administration seems like it's well positioned to, instead of thinking about post high school as necessarily being a loan for college purposes. What if it was a loan for business creation? That's not that big of a leap compared to what we're already doing, which is, you know, student loan interest is subsidized. So we're spending money to make it more affordable to attend college. That's why the interest rates are so low, is that like we actually have an expenditure to keep interest rates low for people to attend college. So this is not a wild idea to say, okay, if we're going to spend money for that purpose, what if we also spent money to make it possible for people to have alternative career paths following college?
And the money's there. You
Hmm.
can argue all day. Right now, we're in discussion. Again, we're not going ultra political. We're not going Trump, Trump, Trump. But we're talking about a $4.5 trillion tax cut for big business. Some of those businesses haven't even paid taxes in the last couple of years. So the money's there. You could take a trillion of that, and yeah, it's a big number, and you could put it right in the small business. Yeah, you're going to say, yeah, there's a default factor. Yeah, there is, but there's also the conservatives' philosophy that liquidation's an artery of free enterprise. So, so it's okay if we have a lot of, not necessarily a lot. It's okay if we have a percentage of young people defaulting on their loans. The investment's going to be huge. The
Hmm.
return on investment is going to be huge. It's going to be better than what we're doing now in a lot of respects. Just like you
Hmm.
said, just like we're doing college education, we're going to have a better return on the investment. The kids are actually going to be like, I'm going to fight for this. I'm
Hmm.
doing something I want to do. This is a one-time opportunity.
Yeah, and something that's interesting as well is like a lot of people say, I changed how I thought about my community and my life and all kinds of things when I became a homeowner. People talk about like the change in mindset that comes with having something valuable and having put its skin in the game, right? It's investment, it's all these things that say like my brain changed how I look at my life and my community and what I do with myself because I bought a home and now I am invested in this place. I want it to be a better place. And I just across the board think differently. And so I wonder how some of these kids would sort of move through the world differently if they did that as a business owner or as somebody who's like really deeply invested in their community rather than just as some kid that's going to college that really doesn't care about college.
Right, and then realizes he's not interested, and then says,
Hmm.
a lot of times kids will say, if I drop this course, I'm getting a fail already, so I'm gonna
Hmm.
stick it out. It's like it's this horrible position to be in. You can't drop. Well, it's the whole point is how did you know what you wanted to do anyway? How did you pick your class? It's just like
Hmm.
I mean, I think that's interesting because I thought you had the most direct route in life. Like you knew you wanted to be this person, this psychiatrist, and then you said, but if I had done what I really wanted to do, I would have been wouldn't have been the path that was right for me.
Yeah, no, I kind of like hopped around, and I think in retrospect, it's easier to see that there were sort of interests guiding it the whole way. But I definitely did not get here by any type of plan. So you know, I was actually really lucky that I went to college at UNC Chapel Hill, which at UNC is in North Carolina, where they have a part of their constitution that says public education should be as close to free as possible. So when I went to college, it cost something like $1,600 a year for
Wow.
tuition, or it might have been a semester, but it was so inexpensive. It was like a tremendous benefit to residents of North Carolina. And it is considerably more expensive now. But still, for a state school, it's very affordable. But I was really lucky I had that opportunity. I think a lot of kids are looking at a college and they do not have an option where their parents could pay for it out of pocket, right? Like that's not a reasonable expectation for most kids anymore. So like it's a lot easier to say like, oh, I'm just going to go to college and figure it out later when it's affordable, but when it costs 30 or $40,000 a year to attend college, we I think most people can't do that and just be like, well, I'll figure it out, right? Like that's crazy.
Well, I don't know if you ever saw Steve Jobs tell the story when he accepts his honorary diploma about how he was a drop in. Like his parents were spending everything they had for him to go to a college, and he realized none of it was interesting to him. So he dropped out and then sat in on creative classes. That's how he learned things
Mm.
that became very creative that he applied to Apple Computer.
Oh,
And it's
wow.
like you should watch that speech. It was like it's on YouTube as well. How he I forget what he was accepting an honorary degree, what university, but he called himself a drop in. Like he told his parents stop paying for college, and he literally just sat in on classes and
Hmm.
learned certain things, and he applied them to the Apple computer that made it totally different than Microsoft computers. And he said, and then they stole it from us like they did everything else. But it was a great speech. And it was really just like that. Like his parents couldn't afford it anymore. And he decided to go the route where you don't have to afford it no more. And it worked out really well.
Hmm.
And that should be what kids do is find we need to spend more time finding out what the kids want to do. And we have seen a lot of creativity in education. That's for sure. We have seen a lot of that lately. And there is a
Hmm.
certain amount of gentrification in the public education system that we've never seen before. And I think it was because of COVID, because then came the online courses and the understanding that
Hmm.
not everything's black and white. So there was that whole never waste a good crisis thing. Because here in Florida, they were trying to close all campuses. We had a governor, Rick Scott, that was just we had commercials of online schools for K through 12, and
Hmm.
I remember thinking this is just horrible. Kids need a campus to go to. They need
Hmm.
interaction with other kids. But they were looking to close every building other than of course the schools their kids went to, but they were looking to close a lot of schools. And it
Hmm.
didn't and then there was that philosophy for COVID where you had to go online. A lot of good and a lot of bad came from it all, but there's
Yeah.
definitely been a lot of new thinking, and that's why I always promote that on my podcast. Like I said, I had Temple Grandin here. You're one of the
Yeah.
thinking.
Yeah. Oh man,
She's
she is so
you
interesting.
got to watch her. She's on
Yeah,
the
I will definitely check that out. I saw
yeah
she came to Clemson and gave a talk a few years ago, and she's just intriguing. I've read a couple of her books too. She has a really different view on things.
yeah.
And
She promoted one on the podcast. Yeah,
yeah, and like what a waste it would have been to have education systems say to somebody like her, well, you don't fit, or what you really need to do is go sit in an office somewhere, when that just wasn't what she was interested in. It wasn't her path. Um,
she
you know,
covered that about one of her jobs, and then the management changed, and then she was a star, and then the management changed. Who didn't understand her and everything. She covered that
mhm,
on the podcast, and then that does happen. Lots of kids with autism we're not seizing that moment. We're not harnessing those abilities
mhm,
at all. There's no reason to believe that that's happening on a grand scale. It's not.
mhm,
It having her on the podcast was amazing and thinking to myself, what if I was the guy that got it to be on a grand scale? I won't be the guy that gets it done,
mhm,
but just thinking that if it ever were done, if I contributed 1 centimeter to some part of it, it would be great, because
mhm.
I used to know a kid, a friend of mine brought him to the house, and he was very autistic. He needed like an iPad to just communicate.
Oh,
And
wow.
so sports wasn't his thing, but then we went in my backyard because it's huge back there, and it was like soccer but with a broom. So we were calling it broom ball, and he really liked it, and he really liked coming over here and playing. My nephews like playing soccer, but then with him they liked playing broom ball. So
That's
it was like
awesome.
yeah, it was really fun for him, and he would like communicate how much he liked it on it. It was a little primitive back then because I'm really old, but but it was really something to think that we could do more of that. Just
Hmm.
that's my one example of there needs to be more of that. We don't need to just assume this this autistic child gets violent because he's bored. Let's find out what keeps him occupied too. Let's spend time on that. And then
Yeah, I think I don't know exactly how you do this, but I feel like you have a really good starting point here, which is a mindset shift, which is just really thinking about kids in terms of their agency, right? And what's important to them and what they want to create, instead of saying fit yourself into the existing system.
yeah, because and we do a lot of that expectation where you don't fit,
Hmm.
so you're no good. I'm not
Exactly.
agreeing with that logic. I'm saying that is the logic. I
That
think it's
is
a
the
horrible
logic.
logic. But
Yeah.
and to say and then to say you're just naive, you're a bleeding heart, and I get a lot of pushback from another side of the aisle from that sort of, and that's fine too because I like the pushback because I like to just be the guy on the wrong side when I know I'm on the right side. But but
Yeah.
it's
Well, I think like kind of what you're saying is, if we get people to be in touch with their sense of agency, that makes them really powerful. Like what we're saying to them is like you can create and make things, and the things that you want to make and create are important and worthwhile. Um, I think that is creating a different type of citizen, right? Like this is, I think, in the end, a very independent way of looking at things, which is, we can decide for ourselves. We can create things for ourselves and choose things for ourselves. And it's just this overall kind of mindset shift as much as it is programs, right? Like you have to create the attitude and the belief before you can necessarily build out a program that supports it.
and then cover the return on investment and then cover that because once you cover that you'll get the investments in it
Hmm.
and the buy-ins. And that's something that would be incredible if we got some movement on. Because, like I said, Temple Grandin is a great example of how much we're leaving on the table every day. It's
Hmm.
enormous. It's enormous to think that corporate America could invest in these kids. They could take them and find a path for them and really get a big return on investment. It doesn't necessarily have to be the public education system. It could be corporate America partnering in it too. And there's a lot of reason to believe that a different approach could have an entirely different result. And then the return on investment even goes so far as less crime. You know,
Oh yeah, absolutely. By
I mean,
people who feel like there's a place for them and they are invested, right? And that they're not just a kid that's screwing up, but they're somebody who is um, building something in the world around them.
yeah. It's really something I'm always focused on. There's a thing called timing out when foster kids time out of their care time and they're 18 and they're sent off
Hmm.
into the world with a state allowance. And you can't even pay for transportation and food with that state allowance and they have to get
Hmm.
housing and everything else. And what chance did they ever have? And I say, and I used to say, I guess I stopped saying it because it was just something I didn't even want to think about. But the one thing they have to trade is themselves. That's the only thing they have to trade over and above their older competition is their bodies and they turn to the drug trade and the sex trade. And we're losing a lot, too much
Hmm.
there. That's a sad. But I know I'm getting I'm kind of going off the beaten path here, but
We have to solve one problem at a time.
yeah, yeah, I just did realize I'm kind of taking on. It's a good perspective, one thing at a time.
Yeah, but I mean, I think Florida's an entrepreneurial state, and I think there's been some interest in doing things a little bit differently public policy wise there. And so maybe you do have kind of an opportunity to generate some interest in alternative pathways for kids.
Yeah, I'm really going to work on it. I have a friend, he's on the podcast often. He wants me to run for city council. So
Oh,
I was
cool.
like, yeah, I'm thinking about it. Because the first time I ran for U.S. House of Representatives, and that was a lot. That was too big to start. I mean, there is somebody out there that started that way, and she's not really my favorite politician, but
It's yeah, somebody I was talking to on a podcast recently, I think she said like basically nobody wins on their first race and that you need to plan to run. I think she said like three times. So
right,
it's interesting because her point of view is like, how do I support people who are running because they need to know it's probably going to take multiple times to be successful. So maybe you got your first one
the first one's
checked
down.
off. Exactly. You're
That
ready for
one's out of
number
the way.
two. Ready for
I am
your
getting
next
ready on number
campaign.
two. Yeah, my friend Banks, who's the one telling me to run, he's been on the podcast. He's on his third, so I think this is his. This may be it. That's good to know. I'll tell him that.
Yeah, well,
Well,
I think it's fantastic, and we need more people running for office and seeking office. We just need more competition for
a
elected
lot, right?
officials.
And
Yeah,
independence, and because that's really where
absolutely.
we need to, because that's important that we get that movement, keep that movement going. But
Yeah.
Lura, I'm always, whenever I get a positive response that you're interested in doing the show again, I'm like, yes, that was cool. So thank you so much for joining us. Thank you so much for joining my podcast again, because you're an
Thank you for
amazing guest.
having me.
It's my
Thank
pleasure,
you.
and I, like always, I'll send you the link. I'll send you the link to Temple Grandin too. You can find that on politicalnobrainer.com and on
Yeah,
YouTube because we've been kind of putting that out there a little bit more. So so
I will definitely check it out. That's
yeah,
super cool.
that's great. Thank you so much. I'll talk to you soon. I'll stay in
Thank
touch.
you. All right,
Thanks, Laura.
absolutely.
Have
Yeah,
a great
stay in
day.
touch.